Firefighters, it's so great to be here live with you today. Thank you for joining. And wherever you're watching from, take a minute, would you please, to drop your name and where you're joining from in the comments, because I really pay attention to that and I love hearing from you. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, welcome to the Fire Drill Fridays family, where we are building community, learning about the climate crisis and what we can do about it. You can see lots of ways to take action to get involved at firedrillfridays.com/take action. So let's get into our topic for today, wildfires in the West and how climate change is hitting home. You know, climate change impacts all of us in different ways and to different levels, but there's no question that the climate emergency is here. Now, it's not something off in the future. Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Fiona have left Florida and Puerto Rico struggling to rebuild amidst widespread damage, displacement, and loss of loved ones. This summer, we saw unprecedented flooding in Pakistan that left 1/3 of the country underwater and mass devastation in its wake. We've seen record-breaking heat waves this year in the UK and Spain, Italy. I was in the middle of that one when we were filming Book Club. Germany, Portugal, China, Tunisia, and the Western United States. It's clear that climate change is no longer a far-off future threat, right? The climate emergency is showing up now in real and urgent ways, disproportionately impacting people of color and low-income communities, and it's only going to get worse if we don't take action together. Now, in today's episode, we're going to take a look specifically at how climate change is hitting home in the Western U.S. In recent years, the scale, size, and ferocity and impact of wildfires has increased dramatically, propelled by climate change and the droughts and heat waves that are worsened because of it. Climate scientists estimate that the frequency of large wildfires could increase more than 30% in the next 30 years and over 50% by 2100. Considering how bad it already is, you know, that's a scary thought. Now, you know, fires are not inherently bad. They've always been part of many ecosystems in the Western U.S., and they've played a vital role in their health. Some flowers, for example, and plants only bloom after a fire. But climate change has altered this natural system, fueling very large and fast-moving fires with more unpredictable behavior. They actually create their own weather. When forests used to thrive with natural cycles of fire seasons, we're now seeing flames year-round. All 8 of the largest fires in California history have occurred in the last 5 years, and 18 of the largest 20 have all happened since 2000. This is not normal, folks. Climate-fueled wildfires in the West have caused tens of thousands of people to lose their homes and countless more displaced and evacuated. Entire communities have been completely destroyed. Meanwhile, millions are impacted by wildfire smoke, which can spread for thousands of miles. You know that in recent years, half of all particulate matter pollution in the Western U.S. has come from fires. There's no amount of wildfire smoke that's safe to breathe. Smoke contains toxic compounds and microscopic particles that can bury themselves in your lungs and pass into your bloodstream. You know, that's how come people who live in fire-prone zones and breathe that smoke were so much more susceptible to COVID. Doctors have shown that exposure to wildfire smoke is linked to respiratory and cardiac illness and preterm births. And like with most climate impacts, vulnerable communities, you know, like unhoused people and the elderly and farm workers, these are the people that are the most affected. Because of climate change, the landscape of the West is changing dramatically in ways that threaten the very livability of the places that we love. Fridays for Future And Fred and Farid LA captured this painful new reality in a short video titled, I Love You, California, and set to a haunting rendition of the state's anthem. Let's take a look.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your summer breezes, and I love your winter rain. I love you, land of flowers, land of honey, fruit and wine. I love you, California. You have won this heart of mine.
Well, that's pretty chilling, isn't it? And it's a powerful wake-up call to all of us. So let's talk about why these wildfires are worsening and how they're impacting people and what we can do about it. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm so excited to be welcoming Brie Bella for today's Fire Drill Friday. Brie is an entrepreneur, co-host of the Bellas podcast, and World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Famer. She also wrote a New York Times best-selling memoir, Incomparable, with her twin sister, Nikki, with whom she owns and operates the wine brand Bonita Bonita Wine in Napa Valley, California. Welcome, Brie. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And joining Brie and me is senior Greenpeace USA campaigner, Dr. Amy Moas, an expert on wildfires in the West. Amy has a doctorate in environmental science and more than 10 years of academic and advocacy experience around forests, fires, and climate change. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me, Jane.
I'm going to start off with you, Brie. What caused you to get involved with environmental activism?
You know, I was lucky because as a young girl, I was born in San Diego, California, and I was born into a produce growing family. So I come from a farming family. My mom, they grew produce. My dad was a tree farmer. So I was always surrounded by nature. But then we moved to Arizona when I was about in third grade. And I very quickly, as a young girl, started to fall in love with untouched land. I think the desert, I got to see so much land that there was no buildings, no homes, no nothing. And I was surrounded by Native American culture and their teachings. So for me, I instantly understood the connection between plant, animal, and human and how important that was. And I think when I started to wrestle and see the world, it was kind of the first time I saw industrial cities, all these factories, so much destruction. And I thought for a second, I would be like, okay, did they ask the trees it was okay to like demolish them and build? Did they kind of ask the land, hey, can we just kind of destroy you and put up all these infrastructures? So I started to feel like, wow, the environment has no voice. They're voiceless. And I thought to myself, I need to be that voice. So I felt like in my early 20s, I really realized that, well, I have a voice that could help the voiceless. And I got into all of this.
How very moving.
Yeah.
You know, I love the mantra that frontline communities say, nothing about us without us.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Amy, why are wildfires getting so much worse in the Western US? What's driving that change?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jane. Yeah, it's no one's imagination that we're hearing more and more about wildfires, right? All across the US. Just this year, New Mexico saw its largest wildfire in history. Earlier this year, Colorado saw its most destructive wildfire, the Marshall Fire, that destroyed about 1,000 homes. And in California, over the last 10 years, going back to 2012, a total of 12.7 million acres has burned. That's one in every 8 acres across the state. So I'll just pause there for a second. 1 in every 8 acres in California has burned in the last 10 years. In 2020, we saw the largest wildfire in California's history. We often talk about mega fires, but this one burned over 1 million acres, making it what we call a gigafire. So it's happening all over, and it's getting worse. And it's no surprise that climate change, and primarily the burning of fossil fuels, is fueling the flames. Climate change has been linked to increasing the size of fires and how fast they travel. And now, Jane, you mentioned in your opening that fires are a natural ecosystem occurrence in many places throughout the West. So fires will always happen, right? Climate change itself is not sparking these fires. And so we should always remember that fires can be a good and healthy ecosystem force in many places. My favorite example is the beloved giant sequoia trees. So its cones will only release its seeds during a fire. So we will not see the next generation of giant sequoia trees without fire. But before, these fires were smaller and more predictable and happened during a distinct wildfire season. And now, like you said, we are seeing fire conditions and flames essentially year round. Now, why is that? So it's climate change that is fueling drought conditions and heat waves, right? That's gripping much of the Western US. We are in the middle of a mega drought. It's the driest conditions that we've had in 1,200 years. And just last month in parts of California, we saw both the longest and the hottest heat wave on record. So it doesn't take a PhD to understand how hotter and drier conditions can fuel larger fires.
Thank you for that answer, Amy. Thanks. And now to you, Brie, what are the ways that you're seeing climate change hit home in your life? What about Bonita Bonita wine, for example?
Yeah, it's interesting because of climate change, you're starting to see harvest shift and farmers have to pick grapes early. And I think the biggest thing I've seen from, let's say the last really big 2020 fire is that, yes, fire has been taking down vineyards, but it's the smoke damage to grapes. And for example, us this year, the production, we were only able to bottle up 300 cases compared to tripling that. And people are like, well, you still got to bottle some up. Yeah, but you also got to think it's this domino effect of all of a sudden, then we don't need as many employees. And you start to see, a lot of wineries shutting down, which a lot of people are losing their jobs. And there's no more fire insurance. So you got to pay all this money for this crop insurance for these fires. They are unpredictable. Like Amy said, you never know when it's going to come. It feels like it's fire season all year round down here in Napa Valley. And, it's really scary because it is a domino effect and it's changing the wine business down here and Napa grapes that we all love, I feel like, around the world. So we're seeing a lot happen and it's sad. It's really sad.
Have you personally had any other impacts from wildfires?
I mean, yeah. I mean, when we moved here in 2020, my son was 6 weeks old, and I'll never forget the morning I woke up and I'm like, I think there's smoke in the house. And I didn't know if there was a fire in our house. Well, the St. Helena fire, the glass fire, was 10 miles away. And the first thing I thought about was, this isn't good for my 6-week-old baby. So all I knew is like, okay, we have to get out. So I got everyone into the van and I just drove to my cousin's house. She lives about 2.5 hours away. And I just thought like, okay, we have to not only evacuate because of the flames, but to me, it was the smoke. And it's like what you said, it's the damage it does to the little ones, to yourself. And that's why we always have to be so thankful for the firefighters, because I mean, they're not only risking their lives, but they're risking their next 10, 20 years of their health. Yeah. And so, I mean, we were very blessed the sense that the winds took the fire the other direction. Because if it would have went the way it was coming, our house would have been down.
Wow.
Oh, Brie, I am a mom myself. And so how gut-wrenching is that to wake up and just worry that your little baby doesn't have healthy air to breathe? Oh.
Right. Exactly. And, it's interesting because I was lucky enough to be able to go somewhere else. And I think of all the families that are forced to stay in the smoke. And you almost and I feel too, we're not educated to know, do you just keep living life and smoke? Do you wear a mask? You don't know what to do. Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important to educate Californians who are in this fire season year round and letting them know the things to do when it is here. If you don't have the ability to evacuate.
Right. Amy, I want to talk about that, but also how is climate change changing the livability of these places that we love?
Yeah. So I love to use California as an example, and I know it's your home, Brie, but really there are parallel examples that would make this true for anywhere our fire drill family community loves. So many millions love California because of the centuries-old reputation as it's a land of opportunity with amazing weather, right? And the gorgeous beaches and really remarkable forests don't hurt either. But that famous weather is now not like what it used to be, right? The drought is so severe that you have to think about how you wash your dishes or how you shower, right? The heat waves are so intense that it makes just working or taking your kids to school a perilous, health threatening event. And all that, along with weeks of enduring unhealthy, smoky air, it's all transforming not just our relationship to the place that we call home, but also changing how healthy and livable our homes are, right? Yeah. And when we're talking about livability, it's important to point out that fossil fuels are endangering our health at every turn, right? So you have first the pollution from extraction that is happening. It's disproportionately impacting Black, Latinx, Asian American, Indigenous, and working class communities all over the West. While on the other hand, the pollution from the fossil fueled wildfire smoke is also forcing millions to live with unhealthy air. And of course, that includes the disadvantaged communities with extraction pollution. So they're getting a double whammy right there. But all of this, Jane, is in addition to probably the most obvious answer to this question, which is that, larger and faster wildfires are directly changing the livability of tens of thousands of people who have lost their homes or their livelihoods to flames, right? Nothing can compare to seeing your home burned down or seeing entire communities burned off the map. Millions of people across the West live in areas that are at risk of wildfires. Most acutely is where human development is moving deeper and deeper into forests or into other natural lands. We call this area the wildland-urban interface, and more and more climate pollution is spewing into our atmosphere every minute. Many Americans are questioning whether or not we can, or let alone if we want to continue to live in these areas.
Yeah. Brie, you've seen these wildfires worsen in recent years. Has that changed your perspective on the climate crisis?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I think it makes, when people say seeing is believing. It's like, how do you not believe that we are in a climate crisis when you see how these fires get bigger and bigger, they're happening closer together. And for me, it's always about the facts, and we have the facts, we're living in it. And so it makes me realize that I need to have a bigger voice. I need to do more things. And I already feel like I do a lot, but I'm like, no, I do need to do more. And I need to help educate other people, because if we don't do anything now, then, we just can't throw our hands in the air and not. And so definitely, I think as a whole community, it's made everyone want to come together and see how can we change the way this climate is going.
Do you feel, is that true? People are coming together because of the pervasiveness of the wildfires, or making them say they want to do something and band together?
Definitely in wine country. I do see it with the farmers. And I think it's because you've seen so many farmers lose so much. So many move away because they can't keep up. It takes 5 years to when you replant to have production. A lot of these farmers had to move. But I feel like Napa, nature's always been first. And you're starting to see, one of my close friends, Carlo Mondavi, came out with the Monarch tractor, an electric tractor for the vineyards. You're seeing farmers not even sell plastic anymore. They're using aluminum waters to only sell. Like, you see different parts of the community coming together on how to be greener, more eco-friendly, use less water, recycle water. So that's the one great thing I am seeing about wine country, is that it's the fight for the climate crisis.
And what do you say to people who you think maybe don't really take the climate crisis seriously, or think it doesn't affect me,
Right. I mean, living in denial is a big thing. And I think, the facts are the facts, and seeing is believing. You can't anymore just push it to the side, push it, shove it under the rug. It's all here. It's now in our backyards. It's going through our homes. Especially here in California, summers are longer, fire seasons are connecting. And I mean, I always ask people, then give me the facts that it doesn't exist. And no one can, because the facts are that the climate crisis is here and we have to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Amy, what can people and governments do about the out of control wildfires in the places they live?
Ooh, it's a big question. So let me start with governments. Yeah, the root of any effective action to address out of control wildfires has to start with getting the climate crisis under control, right? So that means we must start with transitioning off of our fossil fueled economy and into one that's renewable and equitable. If your bathtub was overflowing, flooding your house, you would never start mopping up the water on the floor without first turning off the tap. But unfortunately, so many of the policies and initiatives that we're seeing today to address wildfires are simply just a mop. Until we have the courage and the power to turn off the tap of fossil fuels that is driving our climate crisis, we will continue to be fueling the flames. And we have more fossil fuels in the ground today than our planet can afford, right? That means that if we keep digging for fossil fuels, that we will blow past that degree of warming that we need to stay within in order to maintain a livable future. So first, our president and our state elected leaders could absolutely stop issuing new permits for drilling tomorrow. And they could detail a phase out of the supply of fossil fuels that is aligned with the urgency that science tells us we must have. But to pivot to what people can do, we absolutely can reduce how devastating fires are to human lives. So on the smoke side, smoke shelters and local building code improvements to air filtration could absolutely save lives from unhealthy smoke inhalation. Mm-hmm. And we also know how to safeguard homes from flames, right? So in 2017, there was a fire in California, just outside of Los Angeles in the mountain area, right outside of Burbank and Glendale. And 1,400 homes were in the direct path of this fire called the La Tuna fire. It was directly in the path or within 200 feet of the flames. And yet we only lost 5 homes. Right? How is that possible when you compare it to other fires like the Camp Fire, right? The most destructive fire in California history that burned through the community of Paradise. And you see the photos of just home after home after home completely destroyed. So how are these two examples so different, right? But the answer is actually quite easy. We're talking about 2 things. We're talking about home hardening, which are retrofits that you can do to your home to make it more fireproof. Such as fire-resistant roofing, vent coverings, chimney screens. All of these can actually prevent little embers, little bits of fire from actually sparking a fire in your home. Yeah. And the other answer is defensible space. So this is clearing of vegetation within about 100 feet of your home, directly adjacent to your home. So stronger building codes for all of these retrofits for your home, and funding to help homeowners clear this vegetation can make a world of difference. And so I'll just say that if folks that are watching right now in the Fire Drill Fridays community, if you live within a fire prone region, definitely seek out more information about these powerful tools to protect your home, right? This is all alongside stuff like preparing for an evacuation, having an emergency supply kit on hand, and creating an action plan for yourself and your friends and family. And for almost everybody else in the West that is at risk of enduring unhealthy, smoky air, definitely understand your personal risk, right? And check local air pollution levels. And if you're able, buy an air filter for your home, or you can also create your own and stay home whenever possible. Exposure to wildfire smoke causes very real impacts, right? To children, I think to Brie, to your little son, and to pregnant people, to the elderly, to unhoused, outdoor workers, all of the folks that have underlying health conditions, right? Smoke is a real threat. So there are resources right now on the Fire Drill Fridays website. So if you just look at the link in the description right underneath this video, we'll put some resources that cover all of this, things like where to track nearby fires or local air pollution levels, what to put in your emergency supply kit, how to make an air filter for your home. And Jane, if you'll give me one last minute, I wanted to point to one thing that you did not hear me say as a solution. We hear so much about forest management and how we just need to clear out the fuels and log our overly dense forests. Mm-hmm. But let me make it clear that that is not a solution. Logging and clearing brush provides zero home protection benefits if done more than 200 feet from a structure. And yet you see the Forest Service and logging companies conducting logging project after logging project, even some with huge clear-cut areas, all under fire prevention pretexts. So the truth is that logging emits carbon dioxide pollution, which contributes to the climate crisis. Logging harms wildlife. And again, it does not change the areas that can burn or even how severely or how hot they burn. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of things that we can do about wildfires, but more logging is simply not one of those things.
Well, I had a ranch in New Mexico. It was a very large ranch in New Mexico in the hills. And there were a lot of trees that were dead because of the 10-year drought. The bark beetle, of course, was then able to pierce into the bark of the pine tree, which when there was no drought, it couldn't, the beetles couldn't, because the resin in the tree would stop them. But with the drought, the resin was drying up. And so the bark beetles go in and they kill the trees. And of course, a dead tree is going to be much better tinder than a healthy tree. And so I cut down all the dead trees on my property. Is that something that makes sense to you?
Yes, I love that example, Jane, right? So if individuals have areas on their land or forested areas with dead trees, absolutely, there is nothing wrong with cutting those trees down. The problem is that in order for a logging company to make money by going into public lands to clear out some of those trees, the only way they're going to make money is if we also let them cut down live trees, right? And we are talking about huge trees and big swaths of land. So it doesn't actually end up helping anything. We're not actually saving homes. But yes, there are plenty of things like that landowners can do to protect their land and reduce their threat to fire.
Thank you, Amy. Brie, what are ways that you're taking action to address climate change in your life?
You know, I for me, it's all starting at home and teaching my little ones. I think the biggest thing is, because I've been in California for so long and with the drought, is just conserving water. I mean, it comes to every night we have bedtime routines with our kids, and it's small baths. And I always, our kids know the trees are thirsty. So we take very small baths. We usually will shower as a family, and we're very big into military showers, on and off, scrub your body, put the water back on, and it goes to washing dishes. I mean, all these little things that people are like, well, what does that do? Well, it does a lot, especially like how many households there are. If we can all learn to conserve water just in our households, between all the daily things we do with electricity, all of it, I think it makes a big difference. And just being mindful of my carbon footprint. I've always been really big about that. And I've always, lived a more simple life, because it's not as stressful and it's, easier. So I just think being mindful, conserving electricity, water, and all that, and you're on your way to, making bigger things happen.
Just out of curiosity, and, forgive me if this is redundant, but Brie, what do you want your followers from around the world to take away from this episode?
I would love for them to take away that they can help make a change. And, I think sometimes it's really hard for us to think, well, what's my first step? How do I do it? Where do I do it? And I think Greenpeace, it's always been the place for me to not only educate myself, but to go to Greenpeace and I'm like, okay, where can I help? How can I do this? And whether it's on your social platforms, I don't care if you have 5 people that follow you or 5 million, you're reaching to people, you're helping educate, you're educating yourself. And I think the smallest thing you could do in your everyday life that can be a little more greener, a little more eco-friendlier, you're going to start to realize that you're going to start to do bigger things. And so I think this episode will help them to realize that, take that first step.
I go back to what you said in the beginning, Brie. You're giving the earth a voice, right? So everybody use your voice, right? Stand up for doing the right thing. There's solutions available, right? Just stand up and use your voice.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you, Brie, when you say, I'm not using my platform well enough. I've got to find out a way to use my platform. That's such a good way of thinking. And it's certainly what I've tried to do for most of my adult life. How do I use my platform? And not everybody has to have a platform to make a real difference. But, this is a collective crisis. And it can be solved with collective action. We can do a lot as individuals, but we really have to work together. That's why I'm so focused on Fire Drill Fridays, because we're building a community, and that's what we need. We need community. I'm so glad, Brie and Amy, that you joined our community today. I hope you'll keep in touch with us, and thank you very much for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. It was an honor to be on here. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jane. It was great. Thanks.
The driving force behind worsening wildfires in the West is very clear. Climate change, caused first and foremost by the burning of fossil fuels. That means that the solution is clear too. We need to phase out fossil fuels as quickly as possible to get the climate crisis under control. It's really important for us to make clear when we talk to people, especially people who are skeptics, that we make it real clear. We're not talking about, we're just going to stop using fossil fuels tomorrow. No, we can't. We have to be building the alternatives, green energy, solar, wind farms, electric cars, and plug-in stations. We have to be doing all that while we're beginning to phase out of fossil fuels. We need both to be going on. What has to stop immediately is new fossil fuel development, new drilling and mining and fracking. That's what the scientists are telling us has to absolutely stop. And we need to get better at preparing for and taking care of each other when wildfires get to know your neighbors, know their telephone numbers, know their emails. Make sure that you all know each other, that you trust each other, that you're going to take care of each other, because community is needed now more than ever. And this is just as true for the many ways climate change is hitting homes across the globe. The climate crisis, it's not a distant threat. We're living right smack dab in the climate emergency. And it's only going to get worse if we don't do something about it together. Now, you know the drill, firefighters. To make change, we have to take action. So join thousands of other firefighters across the country by going to firedrillfridays.com/take action. And tell President Biden to declare a climate emergency. Declaring a climate emergency isn't, it's not just lip service. It's a critical step he needs to take to unlock the full potential of actions that he can take to combat the climate crisis. For example, Pentagon money becomes available to use to address the climate crisis that wouldn't be available to him if he doesn't declare a climate emergency. Let's make sure the politicians act like it's an emergency, that they vote with the climate in mind. It also means voting in elected leaders who get it. We've got to vote like it's an emergency and help drive others to turn out in the midterm elections. You can find out more and get connected to your volunteer opportunities that are near you by going to firedrillfridays.com/take action. These are scary times, firefighters, they are, but we're strong, we're resilient, we're building a little army. We were born for these times. You know, we call each other firefighters for a reason. We are the first responders for the planet, for our communities, and for each other. That's why we're here. And there's nowhere I'd rather be for sure than with you doing the most important work of our time. And think about this. I think about this all the time. We are the last generation that can take action to avoid catastrophe. We are the ones, the last ones, with the ability to save the future we want for ourselves, our children, and all sentient beings. God, it's such an awesome responsibility. And if we step up and do what must be done together, at the end of our lives, we can go out in peace, knowing we did everything we could. Of course, I think about that a lot, given that I'm almost 85 years old. I guess a young person wouldn't respond to that too well, but I just want to be sure that when I'm ready to go, that I know I've done my best. Next Friday, join me here, same place, same time, to talk more about the importance of voting and what you can do. See you then, firefighters.